All right, it is now the top of the hour. Hello and welcome to our Career Toolkit webinar, Overcoming Top Job Search Fears. My name is Jessica Colts, and I am a Senior Career Services Advisor for the university. And we chose and selected this topic to kick off 2025's series because we know it's a topic that resonates home to most of us. In fact, in 2020, a Harris poll for Glassdoor indicated that 92% of recipients of the survey were fearful and anxious of their job search. And we are going to go through a series of slides and then open up to a live Q&A at the end. So if you have questions, we'll have answers, I promise. For right now, you'll notice that the chat function in the Teams features is enabled. That is because our Q&A is where you're going to be inputting any questions you may have. And so wanted to make sure that you are aware of that as questions pop up, or if you brought any questions to the table, please input those in the Q&A. Let's go over high level what to expect for the next few minutes before we go into our Q&A session. I will be addressing some of these top job search fears that include fear of the job search itself, fear of rejection, fear of the unknown, fear of failing, and FOMO, fear of missing out. Again, I see that there's a hand raised. If you have questions, please input those in the Q&A section of the Teams. Again, chat's not enabled right now. So let's talk about fear of the job search itself. It's without question, job searching can be overwhelming. To successfully find a job, it's going to require you as a job seeker to apply to several applications and tailor and retailor your resume, some of which may feel like it's just countless effort in terms of the number of applications you're submitting. Perhaps it just seems daunting to just go ahead and update the documents that you need to, and can often feel like a full-time job. And I mean, we know that the job seeking process takes time. In fact, approximately 40 to 50% of job seekers that are currently looking for employment will be doing so for 6 months or more. And that can be just tedious and an overwhelming thought. Now, we know that there are some steps to make this seem more accessible. And so I want to give you some pointers on how to overcome any fear it may be to get started with that job search. Let's break it down into smaller steps. So instead of thinking of just, okay, end game is landing the job. Yes, it is. But what are the steps I need to do to get there? And celebrating those steps along the way. And so identifying things like updating your resume, that's a win. Updating your LinkedIn profile, create that checklist, whether it's digitally or old school, just written down. Check those out. Physically checking off those items that you're completing helps you feel like you're making forward progress. And I want to tell you that whether it's tailoring your resume, preparing for interviews, your career services team here at Rasmussen has a lot of resources like Handshake and Hiration, as well as extensive content that we have built up to really help you navigate each step of your job search. So you're not in it by yourself. You may feel like it, but you have truly a team of individuals that are part of that process for you, and all of these resources can be found in the Career Resources Guide. Now, I talked about establishing goals. So it's great to break it down into bite-sized bits, right? Versus, okay, end goal is getting that job. You're going to want to create specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound goals. So you may have heard the acronym SMART. That's what we're talking about here. And that helps you keep on track and, again, satisfied. So not only are you completing tasks that you've now broken down into a checklist, but you're holding yourself accountable, time-bound, etc. Looks like we have someone that can't hear, so bear with me one moment. Next fear that we want to just go over is going to be the fear of rejection. Hearing no hurts, right? Nobody likes to be told no. We are often found to be fearful of the process of applying. We're self-conscious perhaps about how well we interviewed. Are we answering the questions we're supposed to? Maybe you're self-conscious during that interview as well. And the concept or idea of networking can be intimidating, not to mention knowing that you're very likely one of others applying for these positions. In fact, sometimes you can see a estimation of how many people have applied per specific job site that you're applying, right? All of that can tie into that feeling that you're going to be told no, right? And or not get the offer. And that can just really boil down to not even going for the application. So if you already have it in your mindset that you're not going to get the job offer, you may not even apply. So you are not even getting essentially in the game for that position. But it's important, if you feel any of these aspects, that you reframe your perspective. Yes, no's are personal. They can feel really personal. It's about me, but it's important to think about the process. So I actually was on LinkedIn yesterday evening. I check quite regularly LinkedIn and just kind of see what notifications, what conversations are happening. It's a good habit, by the way. I'm going to plug that in for you guys to keep in the back of your mind as well as you're going through your job search process. But what I came across was a great quote. Every no is one step closer to yes. And so it's an opportunity for you to grow, improve, become the best version of yourself as a professional. Ask for and request for feedback, if possible, about your interviewing. Reach out to the employer about why you weren't qualified for the position if you aren't offered an opportunity to interview so that you can understand either what was needed or how to improve so that you can get to that next phase for the interview. Well, if you're in the interview process and you are passed on, even if you're in that final stage, look for ways that you can improve and celebrate that you are constantly looking for continuous improvement. Another tactic is visualizing success. Picturing yourself acing the interviews and receiving the offers can be a very powerful motivator, especially as you persevere a job search that's not going to happen overnight. And it's important to realize that and to use those as a way to navigate any fear that you may have of rejection. All right, so the next fear is that of the unknown. Okay, what next? What's going to lie ahead? What does the future hold, right? All of those things are probably thoughts that you may have had, whether they're related to job search specific, but the element of future is something that we cannot control completely. However, in your job search, you can focus on aspects that you can control so you don't have as much anxiety about the uncertainty. So that includes how many places you're applying to. You're networking. Are you actually networking, or are you logging in and looking at your LinkedIn profile and identifying people you would like to connect with? So actually making those connections, or going to any in-person networking event that may be happening in your community, whether it's Chamber of Commerce or another professional group that would allow you to build your network. How about your interview prep? Have you leveraged Hieration's interview preparation or interview question bank features that are included in that AI-powered tool that you have as a student and graduate? By shifting your focus to the process, you find yourself more likely to be successful in the outcome. And so think through that and look at ways that you can focus on what you can do and less on what we can't do. Because ultimately, we got to accept uncertainty. Job market's unpredictable. In fact, you may find that you have applied for positions that are no longer there and they weren't filled because they were yanked before they actually came to being filled. So things can change with employers. It's important to realize those are factors out of your control, and trust in your efforts and be comfortable being uncomfortable with uncertainty. It's a fact of life. It's part of what we got to deal with. And so think of how you can apply that to your job search as well. As we move on to the fear of failing, this is another very common fear. I know probably for me personally, that's something that I can relate to. I would say I tend to be a little bit more of a perfectionist. And so thinking through one of these fears may resonate more with you, or you may resonate with all of them, and that's okay. But I always say when you find yourself setting unrealistic expectations for yourself, it's important to accept that you can't live up to those. And oftentimes, expectations that we have on ourselves or that we perceive others have are just what I said, they're unrealistic. And so it's important when you find yourself feeling like you can't live up to expectations, or that you are just frankly incapable of starting a new career or a new job. It's been too long, you are shifting industries, you're re-entering the workforce after an extended period of time, this is your first new job in a very long time, that you lean in on your strengths. These are your unique skills that bring you to the position, that have brought you to where you're at today. And they include those related skills, those transferable skills that from prior experiences. And it's important not to negate even what you may think are unconventional examples of skills you have. And it's also important to realize it's okay not to know. So you accept a position, or you are considering accepting a position, they're not going to expect you to know everything about that job. You may be 100% qualified in every single thing, yet you've not worked with that employer if you're accepting a new position, or within that department. There's cultural aspects, there's things to take into consideration. It's a new job. You're going to be onboarded. You're going to have training. It should be expected. So it's okay to not know. And it's also important that you do really take into consideration the education you're earning or have earned, as they've really prepared you for this next chapter. I'll talk specifically about all of our Rasmussen courses, right? We have learning outcomes that are built in that identify transferable skills throughout your entire program with Rasmussen. And each course has specific skills that are highlighted. These include things like digital fluency and communication and critical thinking, among others. Those are all skills that you're building and are continuing to build if you're still completing your program with your education. So don't think for 1 second you have no experience, because you do, and you have things that you are bringing to the table. And if they're offering you a position, it's because you are somebody that they want on their team. So take that into consideration. As we go into the last fear we're going to be highlighting, which is FOMO, fear of missing out. That concept that grass is or will be greener, if you will, on the other side. We will always question choices we've made, at least to some extent. It may not be a fear of yours, but that's a natural inclination. Is this the right thing to make? It can be scary to start something new, to take on a leadership position if it's um, you're going up the ladder, if you're completely changing everything about what you did professionally and you're shifting gears into a different industry, to even wonder, is this the right career for me? Am I the right fit? And sometimes we often can feel the pressure from others to, gosh, you've been applying, you may have heard this, you've been applying for a lot of positions. You need to just accept this one. This is going to be the right position for you. If it doesn't feel right, don't feel like you have to because someone's telling you to. And that can then exasperate that feeling of missing out if you actually do that. And so it's important along your job search process that you celebrate your successes. So every interview that you've been granted, positions that you've offered and perhaps chose to decline, or reasons that you accept positions. Celebrate each one of those milestones and honestly celebrate when you start even go to that application. It can be scary just to hit submit sometimes. And if you really are looking for some additional guidance, seek out mentorship. Your faculty are great examples of a mentor. It could be a former or current manager or supervisor or colleague. It can be a professional that you have networked with that is in a similar industry or in a similar position you're hoping to get to in your career that you've met through LinkedIn or through any networking group or chamber event that you may have been attended. And sometimes those people are family and friends too. Um, but it's important that you find someone that you can have as a trusted colleague for professional advice. And that's not always our family and friends. And so it's important to look at your inner circles and identify who could be a good person to talk through your career goals and provide you some reassurance on where you're at and where you want to be and the process that you're going there, because that can all alleviate some of those feelings that you're missing out and that you need to do more or that you're not doing the right thing, and help quiet that noise that can go throughout our minds. As I mentioned before, if you have questions that have popped up, throw them in Q&A as we wrap up here. I want to talk about just some reminders on just strategies for success. So whether or not all or any of these fears have resonated with you personally, whether you're actively looking for employment right at this moment or have in the past, there are some immediate takeaways that you can put into play right now or have in your back pocket for when you're ready to start your job search. And if you're considering starting your job search, the time is now. So let's talk about these 5 main takeaways I want you to have. Make sure you're breaking down that process into smaller steps and you're really identifying SMART goals so that it's tangible, achievable, and allows you to continue that step forward. Reframing your perspective is powerful. Thinking about the process and then visualizing the success, that end goal, can really help motivate you to persevere. And remember, we can only control so much, but there are some things that we can control. And so making sure that you are staying on top of applications and applicable follow-up and practicing your interviewing and tailoring your resume and updating your LinkedIn are great things that help you in the process. And then recognizing that there's always going to be uncertainties. And frankly, your job search will have unpredictability, and it's usually not just a to B. Sometimes there's zigzags and different avenues that you explore and career paths. And so be comfortable with being uncomfortable because it's going to push you to growth. Leverage your strengths. Remember that you have education, experiences, trainings that are preparing you for this next chapter. And that once that next chapter starts, it's okay not to know. You're not expected to know day one everything that you're supposed to do at the job, let alone even day 15 or day 30. It is expected that you are going to be onboarded and trained and get there. Celebrate all of your job search successes that you have accomplished, even if it's just the submitting of your first application because it's taken you a long time to get to that point. Celebrate all of those wins because it leads to that end goal. And as I mentioned, seeking mentorship, I think that's something that often is neglected as part of the job search. We feel like it's our job search, we're on our own little island, and we're just trying to get through. You have those inner circles, and you should seek out someone that you're comfortable enough to have those tough conversations with, and that can reassure you that you are heading in the right direction and give you the confidence you need to persevere and get to your end goal. All right, so that wraps up the discussion that I have prepared, but I do want to remind you that we do have future toolkit topics and events that you can have access to right through the Career Resources Guide. So if you go into the portal, you can access it through the resources and then the Career Services tab, or right through the hyperlink that I've listed here. I always like to encourage individuals to follow our Rasmussen University Career Services Facebook page. We put a lot of reminders about events like this, as well as professional development articles and infographics that are allow you to get kind of that real quick feedback on how to improve yourself professionally or to help navigate your job search amongst other things. And then definitely subscribe to our YouTube channel. This webinar, along with all of our other webinars, as well as tutorials on how to use Hiration and our other tools, not to mention additional playlists that we have created, are all accessible through our YouTube channel. And by subscribing, if you're not sure what the difference is, you get notification when you access YouTube when we upload a new video. So it's great to be in the know. And then I am going to go ahead and open it up to questions. If you think of anything, definitely put it in. I did have a couple questions that came through. There was a few individuals that weren't able to join today, but they registered. And so one of the questions was, what are some common misconceptions about the job search that can increase fear and anxiety? And so I think that's a great one because it doesn't necessarily fit in one of those fears that I outlined. And so it's the feeling that, you know, you have to meet all qualifications in order to apply. That's often a expectation we all have. And sometimes it's also that we have to meet all of the desired aspects, so preferences. Qualifications are a little bit different, and so it's important that when you are reading through a job description that you are identifying a variety of different skills that you have, and it's okay if you don't have them all. Another aspect would be that your resume has to be perfect. I actually came across somebody, you know, there's all this talk about gotta make sure it is the best looking and it's 100% exactly matches. Well, it has to be authentic to you, and you also want to make sure that it doesn't get stuck through those automated tracking systems, since often AI is what's reading those resumes. And so it's important to get those reviewed, leveraging tools like Hiration, our resume section of our career resources guide, amongst other things. And then that the job search is going to go quick. I already had shared with you that that's not the case. On average, your job search is going to be 44 months to 6 months in length. All right, great question. So we just got a question that came in that was specific about the automated tracking systems, how to get past them. So it's important that you are matching your job, the job description. And so using a tool like the job match function within Hiration, which allows you to have your resume and then upload the job description and provide feedback on what you might be missing, so specific skills. It's important to be thoughtful about any images that you may be using, with the exception of graphic design. Those aren't read by most computers. You need to be thinking about spatially how you're using your document, and that if it's not standard, you know, margins, that can even be a factor with what is read and what may not be read. There's other specific aspects as well, but it's important that you are tailoring your resume to those positions. So you want to make sure that it matches up. So it's usually it's a percentage essentially that the computer is reading that it wants to meet. Another question that came through as it relates specifically to an individual that wasn't able to go is anxiety about getting started, and how can you overcome? So I had talked about at the beginning that the job search process itself, but this is more about just getting going with the actual process. And so it is really ties to breaking down into smaller parts. Do you have a resume? Do you have references? Getting the cover letter, but setting that into individual tasks can be a really powerful way to get started, because it can be very overwhelming at thinking at how do you get started. And ideally, yes, it would be great if you had multiple resumes that had been slightly altered that you can use. But if you have a good start with a resume, cover letter, you have references, and you're starting to take into consideration your professional brand on social media, those are all ways to get you ready. And then frankly, it's hitting apply and submitting your resume. That often is the scariest thing, but once you get started, it's easy to continue versus just thinking about the process. The worst thing that's going to happen, right, is that you don't get the interview or that you don't get the offer, correct? So it's important that you take the opportunity to get yourself out there and to get started. And if you need to leverage that support, getting the mentorship you may need. All right, as we wrap things up, I'm just seeing if there's any other questions. All right, that came through. I will share that I am going to be sending a complimentary document, the recording of this webinar, shortly after we wrap things up. So later this week, I will be emailing that to you, all of you that have attended and that have registered. And then you can have access to this event, like I said, or others on YouTube. I appreciate everyone's time. And so as we don't have any other questions that have come through, everyone have a great rest of your afternoon.